Hello, welcome back to the Smoking Sun channel. In this video, we're looking at a family that lived in Kansas during the 19th century called the Bender family. Now, this video was a suggestion from a subscriber, and if you have a suggestion, head over to Twitter and send me a DM about a story you'd like me to cover. My Twitter handle is @the_SmokingSun. And before we get going, please hit the like and subscribe button and notification bell. And leave a comment and tell me what you think. And here we go. In the 1870s, there were 5 spiritualist families that settled in Labette County, Kansas. One of those families were the Benders. The Bender family consisted of John Bender Sr., who spoke German and very little English, and what he did speak was so unintelligible that nobody understood him. He was described to being rough around the edges. His wife was Elvira Bender, who went by Ma Bender, and was thought to speak very little English as well, and was so unfriendly that her neighbors would call her She-Devil. And then there was son John Bender Jr., who was considered to be an attractive fellow who spoke fluent English with a German accent. He was sometimes referred to as a half-wit, given that he was prone to laughing aimlessly. And finally, there was Kate Bender, who was described as a well-refined and an attractive woman who considered herself a healer and a psychic and would pass around flyers promoting her supernatural powers and healing abilities. Now, she would sometimes hold seances and spoke about her spiritualism, but gained notoriety for promoting free love. They all lived in a small one-room cabin that was built by both Johns. They claimed their land by the way of Homestead Act, where any federal surveyed plot of land was available to settlers willing to live on and develop it. The Bender family were seen as a hard-working, struggling homesteader family and appeared like any other family on the frontier. And besides the small cabin, they built a barn and dug a well, and they also had an orchard. And since their 160-acre property sat directly on the Osage Mission Independence Trail, they built the Bender Inn with a sign on the door that advertised groceries. The small store carried very little, but they did have gunpowder, shot, liquor, tobacco, and a small selection of groceries, and they also sold meals to go along with a quote-unquote safe place to rest for the tired travelers. When they opened the inn, some of the travelers, especially those with large sums of cash that were looking to purchase land and stock, would go missing. When those missing people's families searched for them, they could trace them as far as the Big Hill County in southwestern Kansas, then they found no trace of them after that. In 1871, a man who was known as Jones was found in a nearby Drum Creek with his throat slit and head bashed in. Drum Creek wasn't on the Bender's property. The owner of the property was considered a suspect and was questioned by the authorities, but was later released. In February of 1872, 2 more bodies were found in a nearby field with their throats slit and head bashed in as well. Again, this was not on the Bender's property. Travelers who caught wind of the murders and disappearances shied away from the route. The trail was notorious for quote-unquote horse thieves and criminals, and many people were arrested for the disappearances only to be released, but many had left the area or was driven out by the authorities. In the winter of 1872, George Newton Longcore, along with his infant daughter Mary Ann, left Independence, Kansas and was never seen again. Their neighbor, Dr. William York, went searching for them and questioned homesteaders if they knew the whereabouts of his neighbors. He had reached the Bender's Inn, and he too would also go missing. Dr. York had 2 brothers, Ed York of Fort Scott, Kansas, and Colonel Alexander York, who was a politician in the Kansas State Senate. Both brothers were aware of Dr. York's travel plans, and when he failed to return home, Colonel York gathered 50 men and questioned travelers in every homestead along the way. On March the 28th of 1873, they reached the Bender's Inn and questioned them. Now, the Benders told the men that Dr. York did indeed stay the night, but left the following day. They suggested that he may have ran into some trouble with the quote-unquote Indians, and Colonel York agreed that that was a possibility. 6 days later, Colonel York would return with armed men after a neighbor woman said that Ma Bender chased her off with a knife. The younger Benders denied this claim as Ma allegedly didn't speak much English. She again was accused of this act, and Ma denied it and said that the woman was a witch. This revealed that Ma Bender understood and spoke English better than she let on. And as they left, Kate Bender pulled Colonel York aside and told him to come back the following Friday, and she would use her clairvoyant abilities to help locate Dr. York. The men were convinced that the Benders, along with a neighbor, were guilty, but Colonel York warned them that they needed evidence before they could take action, even though he believed the Benders were guilty. The township held a meeting at a local school with approximately 75 people showing up. This included Colonel York and both John Sr. and John Jr. to discuss all the disappearances that have happened. There was an agreement that was reached that all homes would be searched. And 3 days after the meeting, a man named Billy Toll was driving cattle past the Benders Inn and noticed that the inn was abandoned and that the animals weren't fed. He told the township trustee, but due to inclement weather, when they finally arrived, they did in fact saw that the property was abandoned, with all food and clothing being gone, as well as personal items. And when they pulled back the canvas curtain that was dividing the small cabin, they found a door to a crawl space under a bed. When they opened it, they were taken aback by a staunchy stench that engulfed the room. Now, several men lifted the cabin and moved it so they were able to dig underneath the house, and they used sledgehammers to break the stone, but they found no bodies. The terrible odor came from clotted blood mixed with the soil. The men were tasked to start digging around the property, and they found several bodies buried. Among them were Dr. York's. He was buried in a grave facing down. They also found a body, along with several body parts, in the well. All but one of the murders had the same bashed-in head and slit throat except one. They found a body of a young girl believed to be Mary Ann Longore. She showed no signs of cause of death and is widely believed that she was buried alive. There were 11 bodies in total found, and it is widely believed that there were likely several more. Since the Benders had left several days prior, it was not looking like they were going to locate them. When they searched for them, they found their abandoned wagon, and it's believed that they took a train to leave the area. It's believed that John Sr. and Ma Bender headed for Missouri, and that the younger Benders headed for Texas, likely to cross into Mexico. Colonel York offered $1,000 reward for their arrest, and the governor of Kansas, Governor Thomas Osborne, offered $2,000 for their apprehension. It's believed that the Benders lured their victims with a hot meal and sat them at the seat where their back was against the canvas curtain, as Kate would distract them so that either John Sr. or John Jr. could not be spotted with a hammer hiding behind the curtain ready to swing at their head. One of the women was likely the ones that slit their throats, assuring their deaths. The bodies were then dropped into a trap door of the crawl space and later stripped and buried, mostly in the orchard. Being that some of the victims were wealthy and others were not, showed that the Benders killed for the enjoyment of it. There were several bullet holes that were found on the wall inside the cabin, suggesting that some of the men may have fought back after being attacked. 2 lucky men who experienced Kate's psychic powers stayed for dinner, but they refused to sit at the seats where they would eventually be killed, and this angered Ma, and her temper drove them away. Several vigilante groups were formed to locate the Benders, and there were many stories of one group who found the Benders, killed them all but Kate, and would burn her alive, but this could not be corroborated. There are other stories of other vigilante groups who have claimed to kill the Benders as well. The Benders were believed to be from Germany, but some believe that it's likely that only the males were born outside the United States. John Bender Sr.'s real name is said to be John Flickinger, and John Bender Jr.'s real name was John Gephardt. Ma Bender is said to be born Elmira Meek, born in the Adirondack Mountains, and was initially married to George Griffith, and the two had 12 children. It's said that she would later marry several more times, each after her previous husband was killed from a blow to the head. Kate Bender is said to be the 5th child born to Elmira, and was actually named Eliza Griffith. Some of the Benders' neighbors believe that the 2 younger ones were not brother and sisters, but husband and wife. There is a thought that the 4 all had the willingness and desire to kill, so they formed a family and gave it the surname Bender. It's not entirely known if this is true or if they really indeed were a real family, but either way, they killed together. The Benders were never officially caught, although there had been rumors of them being caught or dying, but in reality it was never truly known. They are believed to be the first serial killers in the United States, beating out H.H.H. Holmes by more than a decade. That was the story of the Bender family, known as the Bloody Benders. A special thanks goes to Debbie for suggesting the story. And again, if you have a suggestion, you can DM me on Twitter at @the_smoking_sun. You can go to my page, and on the About tab, you'll find my Twitter link, as well as the link to my email. Also, if you enjoyed this, please hit the like and subscribe button, and press the bell for notifications of my upcoming videos. Thanks for watching. See you next time.